Hello, kitten. Oh, hello, kitten. This is Kitten. This is Teddy's older brother. This is where Teddy learned all of his rude, interrupting behavior from. This young man also has a birthday coming up on March 9th. He's old. Yeah, he's exceptionally old. Yeah, you're an old man. You're going to be 11. You old fart. Can I do my video now? Thank you. That's not letting me do my video. Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Sarah and I make videos about health and fitness and all of those things, endurance sports, so if that's something that you're into, buttons, things, buttony things, located down below. But today's video it's fitness explained. I know, it's shocking. I see you clutching your pearls. Relax, it'll be okay. But I want to talk about the idea of fitness, and it's more appropriately termed as conditioning. And this is an idea that I teased a little bit in the Heart Rate 101 video, for those of you who watched that video. But it is a companion to the idea of FTP, or if you're in running or swimming, in terms of pacing. And a lot of folks who are coming into these sports, especially those of you who are coming into cycling from the Zwift side, you're getting very hyper-fixated on this idea of FTP, and you're measuring your capability as a rider or as an athlete based on the trajectory of that FTP value. But it is not telling you the whole story. The other part of this equation is in terms of fitness, or this conditioning idea. And this is something that Dr. Andrew Coggin thought of when he really created the entire training dynamic around this idea of FTP. He understood that that power value and that FTP value was not telling you the entire story. So he came up with this concept of performance management, and it's measuring your fitness over time. And I'm going to go through the 4 primary metrics so that you can kind of understand these different elements and how it feeds into your capability as an athlete or as a rider. Now, where this becomes important is to be able to evaluate what your capabilities are in the course of a training year or a training program. You may see a lot, I've seen it a lot recently, people jumping on the Dylan Johnson bandwagon, his recent, throwing down the gauntlet to TrainerRoad, and talking about this anecdotal idea of people getting burnout during the course of their training. But the reality is that when you're measuring your fitness and you're looking at the more holistic element of your training, this is actually pretty easy to identify in advance. And what happens very often is that people come into a sport and they commit to it and they say, I have 10 hours of training available to me per week, right? I've got 10 free hours that I can devote to my training. So I'm going to go find a plan that is going to fill that 10 hours with stuff. So they are going to go pick a plan, 10 hours a week, and that plan is going to be a mixture of high intensity workouts and low intensity, maybe some recovery here and there. It's going to be periodized around that 10-hour framework. But the issue there is that it's going to have a degree of load, which I'll talk about this idea of load and those values attached to it, but it's going to attach a load on a weekly basis that may be in excess of that person's current level of conditioning or capacity. So what happens is, as they go through the training protocol, they're constantly trying to reach up and hit a level that they're not currently capable of. And as they continue to do that week over week over week, because these training plans tend to add load week over week, they're just going to continue to dig themselves a hole and eventually reach physical burnout. Now, mental burnout is a little bit different. Obviously, you have to take into account your daily life, and people get mentally burnt out even when there's not a lot of load. But in this case, I am talking about the physical load and the physical burnout people see, and they say, hey, you know, I'm training more than my friends and I'm training harder than my friends, but I'm not seeing the same type of gains. It's because they started the plan beyond their capability. And you may see out there when you read some of the literature, this idea of training to train. Sometimes when you want to take on a training plan and you have the hours available for that training plan, you need to build up your baseline fitness to reach the demands of that training plan, or you need to modify that training plan accordingly by taking workouts out. This is something that a coach could potentially do for you, but not all of us are in a point where we want to be spending hundreds of dollars per month on a coach. We're self-coached athletes. We might not have that high of ambitions. We might want to just be competing locally, or we just have better things to do with their money than pay for a coach. So why we would think that a coach could modify our plans based on feedback, but we can't, is kind of silly. We're in this very fixed mindset where if a plan tells us to do something, we need to do every single workout as prescribed and check those boxes, or we're failing, without looking at these values that I'm going to show you to get an honest appraisal where we're at in terms of our fitness and what the plan is actually demanding of us. And we have to make an honest appraisal of those things, and sometimes we need to adjust accordingly. You cannot brute force your fitness. If you take nothing else away from this video, understand that the body cannot just by merit of overreaching your current level of capability over the course of a few weeks, that your body's just going to automatically adapt. What's going to happen is it's going to kind of tell you to pump the brakes, it's going to tell you nicely, and then it's just going to pull the emergency brake on you. So understanding this element and how to look at these things is important when you're trying to evaluate yourself as an athlete and to coach yourself, which I know many of you are doing. Now, in order to use the metrics that I'm going to talk about here, you're going to need a software that is capable of putting together a performance management chart for you and tracking these metrics. That is not all softwares. For those of you who are coming from Zwift, you're not going to see these numbers. You probably don't even know what these numbers are, because Zwift is very much centralized around the FTP piece, and they really don't look at fitness. But a lot of the softwares don't, so that's not really a shot directly at Zwift. And a lot of us as long-term cyclists are using some other type of handler. So you're going to see some images here from TrainingPeaks. That's kind of the mainstay or the granddaddy of all of this tracking, but you can use today's plan. Strava has their own model, which is Fitness and Freshness. Exert is a little bit different, but they do this type of metrics tracking as well. But you need some kind of handler for these data points so that you can kind of use them and see them in your own training. And if you don't have them right now, that's okay. If you have some ride data, you can actually sign up for one of these and populate that in arrears. So you can upload all of your old training data, and it will actually take that and make these computations for you from the past to the present, and then you can continue to move forward. Now, a lot of folks out there I know are using Strava. Strava has this capability, but I believe to get the most utilization out of it, you have to use the paid model. And I would recommend, if you want to start tracking these things, that's probably the most cost-effective way of tracking these metrics. It's, I think, $60 per year still for the annual plan for these types of training metrics. I think that's a great value. If you want to get a little bit more in terms of data, I would highly recommend TrainingPeaks or today's plan. They're a little bit more expensive, but they have a lot more involved. And a lot of it is just about the interface. I think today's plan is a lot more robust in terms of the metrics that it tracks for you, but it really is a bit of overkill for most riders. A lot of people are really comfortable with TrainingPeaks and what they have to offer. So you can kind of go, I'll leave some links down below that you guys can check those out. But I would highly recommend getting one of those three in order to kind of follow along with what I'm going to show you here. So I'm going to start with the baseline value that we use on a ride-by-ride basis. And this is something that even if you are on Zwift, any program, you're probably going to be familiar with this number, or at least have seen this number, whether or not you're aware of it. And that is this idea of TSS. And TSS stands for Training Stress Score. Now, you will see this in Zwift as stress points or stress score, and you might see this in today's plan as T-score. It may fall under different nomenclature, but it is the same idea. And what TSS is it's points that are ascribed to your workout based on a percentage of your FTP or your intensity over time. So what you need to understand about this whole body of metrics here is that it is irrespective of the absolute value of your FTP. So just because you have a higher FTP does not mean you have a higher level of fitness. People have different FTPs for a number of reasons. For example, there's really no way that I'm going to have the same FTP as somebody who is even minimally trained that is 6'5" and 200 pounds. I don't have the muscular size, density, or mass to be able to push those types of numbers. It's just not going to happen. But I can still be better conditioned and more fit, and even potentially faster depending on what type of terrain we're looking at. So FTP is not telling you the whole story. So this is going to give you a relative value, and it is going to gauge your training stress based on your FTP. So it's looking at percentages. So you don't need to know how to calculate these numbers, but it's really easy to kind of figure these things out. And kind of that baseline value that you can use is if you perform 100% of your FTP over the course of 1 hour, you are going to earn 100 TSS. So if you do 75% for an hour, it is 75 TSS. And then people can start to break down those chunks of time and extrapolate your different percentages over periods of time and calculate out your TSS. This isn't calculated as an average of your overall ride, this is calculated in real time. So what you'll see here is, if on Zwift or on TrainerRoad or other platforms, they can give you your TSS in advance because it knows based on what the intensities are and what the percentages are, what you're going to accrue if you follow the workouts as prescribed. And then if you want to track these in real time, usually like a Garmin or a Wahoo, any type of head unit or watch, you can usually set those data fields so it will track TSS, and you will just be accruing them over time. So what I mean by not being an average is if you are working very high intensity for the first hour of your ride and you accrue a lot of TSS, and then you do the second hour of your ride at a low zone 2, you're not going to lose TSS as your average power goes down. You're just going to continue to accrue those points over time. So you're earning them instantaneously, much like you earn kilojoules. So that's important to indicate. Now, while I said that the raw wattage number is not important in terms of how many points you earn, it is important to have that FTP set accurately. If not, your percentages will be wrong. So if you have an FTP of 300 watts and you have it set to 250, your percentages as it's trying to take in those power values, they're going to be way off. And usually these platforms like TrainingPeaks and Strava, they don't automatically update. So you need to make sure that you stay on top of those and manually update those. So in order to get an accurate appraisal of your TSS and the other metrics to follow here, you need to make sure that your FTP is set accurately. So TSS is a value that we are looking at on a ride-by-ride basis, and we can kind of make an appraisal as to what the intensity was, right? You can go back in time without breaking things down. You can look at the duration and you can look at the TSS and give a somewhat of a judgment call as to how much intensity you saw there. You can accrue TSS a number of different ways, right? You can do high intensity, low duration, low intensity, high duration, or something in between. So there's a number of ways to skin a cat, but you are basically getting a decent appraisal of how much load or tax you have put on your body over time, and then you can kind of extrapolate that by looking into the workout to see what type of muscle fibers are being used. Maybe you're doing VO2 max, maybe you're doing zone 4, zone 3, what have you, and you can get a little bit more detail. But it's a good snapshot of what you're looking at, and then as you add those up over the course of the week, you can kind of see what your weekly load is. And that's where these next few values are going to make a little bit more sense. And my concept that I spoke about before, about the fact that you are trying to take on a load for the week that your current fitness is not going to be capable of, a lot of these numbers are going to start to come together. So we're going to take these TSS numbers and we're going to aggregate them and we're going to create the next three values. So the first one of those is what we term as fitness. So that gets a little bit confusing, right? Because we're talking about fitness as kind of an overall state of being in your conditioning, but this metric is actually called fitness, and it refers to your CTL, or your chronic training load. And what that's telling you is the rolling average of your last 42 days of training. So really what the last 42 days of training, including your days off, is going to tell you in terms of average TSS, is going to give you kind of your homeostasis in terms of your fitness. You know, what you're used to, what you can expect to do pretty handily. So if your fitness number is 75, that means that you can tick off 75 TSS in a workout pretty comfortably. Your body is acclimated to that type of load. If you're going to do less than that, it's going to be easier. And if you're going to do more than that, it might put an additional tax on your body. It's not saying that it's impossible. This is not a limit. You can certainly perform more TSS than your fitness tells you that you can, but it's telling you that you are putting a degree of physiological load on your body that it's not acclimated for. So that means you're going to be overreaching, and you can overreach in a very functional way, and that's how we improve our fitness over time. So as you continue to add load to your body over time and you increase the intensity and or increase the duration of your workouts over the course of weeks and months, you'll see that fitness number climb and you'll become more and more acclimated to more and more load. And you don't necessarily have to have a high fitness score to perform well, but you do have to have a fitness score that's going to match with the intensity prescribed by your event, right? So higher category riders are probably going to have a higher TSS because the durations of their rides are probably going to be longer at a higher percentage of their intensity because they're at a higher category. Whereas a lower category rider can still perform very well at a lower level of fitness because that's kind of the standard or the baseline. They have shorter events, right? A criterium for a category 4 or 5 rider might be 30 or 40 minutes, where it might be an hour plus for a higher category rider, or the road races become longer for the higher category rider. So it's important to kind of note that that's not the end-all be-all, but it can tell you some things about your capability and where you stand in terms of what events you might be able to pursue. So the next number here is going to be kind of the relative value here of ATL, which is your acute training load. This is also known as your fatigue, and it's a very similar number. It's computed similarly, but it's done over the last 7 days as opposed to the last 42 days. And the reason it's termed as fatigue is because of the recency. So what you did 30 days ago is going to have an impact on your fitness, but it's really not going to have an impact of how you feel right now, right? Kind of like your nutrition or your sleep. How you slept a month ago has really very little or any bearing on how you feel right now. But how you slept and ate in the last week can certainly impact how you feel and perform right now. So this is giving you a smaller snapshot of what you've been performing in the last week. So this is going to give you an indication of the short-term load on your body, which could be indicative of your fatigue, but you really can't take this number by itself, because in a vacuum, it's not telling you anything. You need to be able to pair that up with your fitness or your CTL value. And the platform will do that for you, and it creates a number known as TSB. And that is training stress balance. And this is generally termed as form, or sometimes freshness. You'll see these terms used interchangeably. But what that's basically telling you is the relationship between those two values. What have you performed in the last 7 days, and how does it correlate with basically your homeostasis or your baseline fitness value? And it can tell you a lot of things about your readiness to perform. Right? Are you overreaching? Are you maintaining? Are you kind of recovering? Where are you at in terms of those two values and their relationship to one another? It could tell you a lot about how you are going to be able to absorb additional load. Now, this obviously leaves out some of the biological or physiological metrics that we can track on things like a Whoop or an Oura Ring or your Garmin's body battery, things to that effect. It's not going to tell you how your stress at work or your lack of sleep or poor nutrition is going to impact you. But all other things being equal, it will give you a pretty decent indication of when and where in your training you are going to be able to absorb the greatest amount of load and increase and be able to maybe reach for those PRs or those high-level performances. So the two values are compared here, your fatigue and your fitness. And basically you compute your TSB by subtracting yesterday's fatigue from yesterday's fitness. So it's going to give you this value, and when your fatigue and your fitness are the same, your form is going to be 0, right? 50 minus 50 is 0. And 0 is pretty much putting you at a maintenance phase. It is telling you that you are just basically doing enough to maintain your fitness. You're not really pushing yourself and you're not really recovering. And you can probably maintain that state for a decent amount of time. All other things being equal, maintaining your fitness is just holding that homeostasis. It's just kind of, hey, if I get on the bike and do the same workout every day for an hour, you're going to basically stay at that form of 0, and you're probably going to be able to actually continue that trajectory indefinitely if nothing else changes. Now, if you are doing a short-term load, your fatigue is higher than your fitness, you're going to start to go into the negative. Your form will go negative, and that will indicate that, hey, you're starting to get a little bit tired. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but you can only push in that direction for so long. And then if you're doing lower volume, maybe you're doing a recovery week or you had to take a couple of days off, then your fatigue will be below your fitness, and then you'll have a positive form, which means you're a lot more fresh. But I've just thrown a lot of numbers at you and a lot of values and just told you just subtract this, that, and the other thing, but it might not have a whole lot of practical value to you because this is just new information. So let me give you kind of some practical examples. So let's say, for instance, that your fitness is at a 75, right? And you've done the last 42 days of training, including your days off and your weekends and whatever that might be, and you've gotten that average TSS score for 42 days of 75. Now let's say you are going to go to a 7-day cycling camp and you are going to turn yourself inside out. You're really going to push yourself and see what you're capable of. And over the course of those 7 days, you perform an average of 100 TSS per day. Great. You're capable of doing that. Your 75 fitness level is not going to hold you back from doing that type of thing. But what's going to happen is you're going to accrue more load in the body. And at the end of those 7 days, your fatigue will be that average of 7 days, which is 100. And then your fitness will have gone up because you're taking that average and pulling it up over the 42 rolling days. And you're going to be at about an 80. So 35 days of 75 TSS plus the 7 days of 100, you're going to be somewhere around 80. So if you perform that calculation and you take 80, which is your fitness, minus your fatigue, which is 100, that puts you at a negative 20, right? Your current state of load is outrunning your fitness at this point. It's something that you are capable of doing, but it's coming at a physiological tax to your body. So you're at a negative 20, right? So now that you're approaching more of a negative value, it might be time to look at shedding some of that fatigue. And you do that with recovery, whether you're taking complete rest off the bike or you're doing lower intensity and you want to bring that fatigue value down so that your form can come up, you can feel more fresh, and then your fitness is going to drop a little bit, but it is also going to allow you to reach again and continue to push forward. The adage in endurance sport is that the adaptations are made during the recovery phase. We break down our muscles and then we have to allow the body to rebuild those muscles stronger. We can't just continue to push and push and push into the negative. So let's circle back to the example I used in the beginning for people who are overreaching on a new plan. Let's say that your fitness is 50, right? No judgment there. Your fitness is just where it is. It's at a 50 right now. And you want to take on this 10-hour-a-week training plan that you saw on TrainingPeaks or TrainerRoad. And if you look at that first week of the training plan, it might have you slated for, let's say, 700 TSS. So let's do some simple math here. Let's divide 700 TSS by 7 because it's a 7-day training block. That's going to be 100 TSS on average per day. Now, if you're going to look at what's going to happen, if you perform 100 TSS per day over 7 days at your current fitness level of 50, your fitness is going to go up to somewhere between, I think, 58 and 60, right? So let's just say, for the sake of easy math, and let's be aggressive, let's say you bring your fitness up to 60. But your ATL, your acute training load over that 7 days, is going to be 100. Well, let's perform that math. And what your training stress balance is going to put you at is a negative 40. You do not want to be functioning at a negative 40 in terms of your TSB. That's going to mean that you are very, very tired. Your form is not that great. You are not in any way, shape, or form fresh, right? So what happens now is that the next week in the training plan is going to add load incrementally. So it's not going to add 100 TSS, but it might add 50 TSS to that week. And it's going to add either time and intensity or just general duration to the training. So what's going to happen is that you're going to continue to push that load up while you have this lagging fitness behind it. And you're trying to drag the fitness up, but you're never going to quite strike that balance, because what's going to happen is you're going to hit that recovery week, and then your fitness is going to decline. You're going to shed a little bit of that fatigue, but then you're going to restart the cycle, and you're just going to continue to decouple those numbers until you hit burnout. Either way, it's not going to end well. And this is why people reach burnout, because they think just because I have X number of hours to train, I can just load whatever I want into that X number of hours without any issues, right? My body, my fitness will just eventually pull up to where I want it to be. Instead of looking at a more intelligent approach and saying, okay, I've got 10 hours a week to train, but maybe I have to lower the intensity on some of those days in the beginning because my fitness is not there yet. My fitness of 50 is not a match for the fitness of 100. It's trying to pull in from this particular plan. So I need to judge accordingly. I either need to train myself up to that point, or I need to adjust the plan accordingly, or go to a lower volume plan. Whatever those adjustments might be, that is something a coach would do, and that's something that you should do if you're self-coached. So I hope that that kind of clarifies where that number might be important. And this is to help you to manage your micro cycles, which are your short term, like a week at a time. So one cycle, you kind of go week to week to week, and you perform training and you complete that cycle. Your mesocycles, which might be several weeks long, usually a training block. So for many people, it's 4 or 5 weeks where you do each week for the first 3 or 4 weeks, and you build on the previous week, and then you take a kind of a deload or a recovery week that lowers in intensity, and those are your mesocycles. And then you take a number of mesocycles and you fit them into usually a year, maybe 2 years. And that encompasses kind of bringing you full circle through the course of this training. And tracking those values over the course of your micro, your meso, and your macro cycles are what we do to take these 3 values we just talked about and feed them into your performance management chart. And this is basically plotting those 3 values over time, and it helps you to visualize the efficacy of your training. So what you'll see here are the 3 different values. The pink here is your acute training load, and you can see the orange here, the yellow here, that is your training stress balance or your form, and you can kind of see some inverse relationships here, right? You can see that your training stress balance and your acute training load are inversely related. And you'll also see some inverse correlation between your ramp rate in terms of your fitness, which is this blue value here, and what you're going to see in terms of your training stress balance. Not directly, but you are going to see some difference. If you have a higher ramp rate, you're going to have a lower balance, right? Your form is going to break down faster if you are trying to ramp up faster. But what you should be looking for in a good periodized training plan is something that allows you to stair step up over time. So I kind of talked about this idea of your mesocycles, right? So you have a build week, then you build a little bit on the next week, and then build on a little bit on the next week, and then you take a little bit of a deload recovery week, and then you repeat the process. And you can kind of see each week will stair step over the next, right? So you've got build, 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 recover, your fitness drops off a little bit, build, 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 recover, fitness drops off a little bit, and you'll stair step up in a generally upward trajectory over time, but it's not going to be linear. You're not going to just have a number that only increases over time. You have to take that load off the body and let the body adapt during the course of recovery. This is something that every single pro, every single elite athlete in the world is doing. Nobody is expecting just an upward trajectory over time. And what you can see here is a very natural decline during the course of the off season. This is necessary because the body can only take on so much load. You can only continue to build until the body just shuts down, right? We're not robots. So you need to have a deload period during the course of your macro cycle, which is known as the off season. It can vary by month and time of year depending on where you live, but this generally happens in the Northern Hemisphere somewhere around September, October, November, where people might take a couple of weeks completely away from their sport. And then they start to add in lower volume, focus very much on base miles or endurance style training. And they take that period of time and they shed a lot of fitness and they shed a lot of fatigue. And that's where you're trying to rebuild your body. You're trying to heal your body and prepare it for the next year of training. And then you get to the point where you want to start building again and you push forward. And depending on how long you've been training, you should see this stair step from year to year as you continue to kind of build on your capacity, right? You're not measuring your FTP over time. So this isn't your FTP dropping off here, although you should see some natural ebbs and flows in your FTP when you're trying to take some time away. But it's not as drastic in terms of FTP. It's the capacity of your FTP. So if you continue to kind of manage this rest and recovery and then your building phases, you're going to continue to see increases in your FTP over time. And as you become more experienced, that increase becomes less and less. Those degrees of improvement become more marginal. What you may have been seeing in the past is a 10 or 15 watt bump might become a 2 or 3 watt bump, but your fitness can still continue to improve drastically because your capability and your conditioning within that FTP that you have is much better, which improves your repeatability, which improves your endurance in general. It improves your ability to perform over longer durations of time. So it's not all about tracking that FTP to see improvement. You want to manage this fitness graph and that performance as a more holistic approach. So if you're able to take your FTP values, pair them up with your performance management chart, and maybe sprinkle a little bit of those biological metrics, your resting heart rate, your HRV if you're into looking at that type of metric, your sleep, your nutrition, things you are doing to recover, bringing all three of those elements into the fold can make the most holistic and most effective training methodology that you can come up with. If you are self-coached, it's very important that you understand this information. Not that you have to sit in front of the computer and make spreadsheets and really dissect every single data element. You don't need to be a data scientist to do these things. What you need to understand is what you're looking at. I can look at this graph and see exactly what's going on. You should be able to look at the graph of your training and understand what you're looking at. You should be able to come back here and take a look at your fitness and fatigue values and look at your form and say, holy shit, I'm at a negative 65. I need to deload or else I'm just going to crack. If you continue to push yourself too far into fatigue, you're going to move backwards. This is when you hear people saying, I'm working harder, I'm working longer than everybody else that I know around me, but they're seeing gains and I'm not. It's because you're riding this horrible line of fatigue and you're not going to be able to just continue to add more load. You're going to move backwards. So you should be able to look at these values and just have a general idea of what you're looking at so that you can make the appropriate adjustments. The same adjustments that a coach would make if you were giving them the feedback and they were looking at your training as well. So I know that there's a lot here. I know that this is probably brand new information for a lot of folks, or you might be somewhat familiar. This is not intended to be exhaustive, but hopefully it will give you the familiarity that you need that when you jump into these platforms, whether it's Strava, TrainingPeaks, Today's Plan, what have you, you have a general idea in your head of what you're looking at, and then you can usually use the links that they include. They usually have little icons, like informational icons and things that you can click on that will give you a more robust description of what you're looking at, and it can remind you and you can continue to kind of learn over time. So as you train, routinely looking at these values and looking at how they trend over time, it can really add a lot of value to your training and it will help you to really listen to your body. There's no more guilt attached to it, right? Look at how hard I've been working. Yeah, of course I feel tired. I'm not gonna feel guilty about taking an extra day off or rotating these 2 workout days that were built into a canned plan for me but don't account for my work stress and other things I have to deal with. I'm gonna make those adjustments because it's the smart thing to do. It's what my data is telling me that I should be doing. You don't have to be so fixed in your mindset around, this is my plan, I need to check my boxes. You can adjust your plan accordingly to meet your needs. Any good coach will tell you that you should be doing that. Any good training plan facilitator is going to tell you you should be doing that. Don't be reticent to do that. And now that you have the data to back you up, I'm hoping that you will be willing and appreciate doing those types of things so that you can see your fitness and your FTP grow over time. So if you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please leave them down below. I'll do my best to help you guys out more down there. If you did get any value out of this video, I'd appreciate if you hit the thumbs up button. It really does help the channel and the video quite a bit. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'll put 2 more training videos in my face region somewhere here. And as always, I will catch you guys in the next one. See ya.